Before we move on to the second 90% in the optimization, I want to do some project cleanup. And I want to showcase this video to recommend that you do this every once in a while, right? Because we've been building a bunch of stuff, testing things, trying things. Our workspace gets messy. And this is the analogy that I always use. It's like I'm in a wood shop building a chair. And while I'm building the chair, there's sawdust everywhere. There's tools laying around. Like, the place is a mess. But now that we've got the basic chair being built, before we start painting it and standing it and getting it looking nice, let's clean up our shop a little bit. So that's kind of the point of this walkthrough of the whole project, where I go file by file and just take a look, right? Clean stuff up. This is mostly aesthetic, and I want to preach this because a clean, organized code base is so important to have. Maybe many of you have worked in horrible, messy code bases, or maybe some of you have some of your own. You know it's kind of a nightmare to work in. So every once in a while, I recommend going through the project as best you can and just doing some basic maintenance and cleanup. And I'm going to go through pretty quickly because it is mostly like aesthetic stuff, and your project may look completely different. Maybe you've been leaving comments for yourself as notes. Maybe you wrote things a different way. Maybe you have a different like visual aesthetic style for your code. That's fine, but I'm going to show you how I do it just to show you another person's perspective. So literally file by file, let's go managers. And again, I'm going to go quick. I know that sounds tedious, but one thing I like, and I'm going to actually zoom out a little bit so this looks kind of normal, because you don't have to read what the code says. We're talking more about code structure and aesthetics than code. So if it's too small to read, don't worry about it. But I do like to have two spaces in between functions. I feel like that visually separates them a bit. And then I will line up these equal signs. So this is the kind of stuff I do, like I said, just to, again, it's like a cleaning pass of the code base. So again, two things here. And I know you may be thinking, oh, I'm not going to watch Sean do all this. There are some interesting things coming up. You're not just going to watch me line up equal signs, but you'll get some good insights onto how I think about spacing. And of course, you want to get rid of any excess comments that aren't needed. Like I said, I've seen plenty of people turn in like take-home projects where there's just excess comments like everywhere and stuff. So definitely get rid of those. And then you'll see just, how I'm cleaning up my vertical spacing, making things a little more compact. Again, the point of this pass is to just get things looking neat, right? I want somebody new coming into my code base. I guess Desired Keys has it too. I want somebody new coming into my code base to just be like, wow, this is really neat put together. I'm excited to work in this. And it sets the tone that when new people and new teams come into your code, not teams, teammates, like, hey, this is the cleanliness standard we have. Like, step your game up, and it's good. Whereas if they come into a mess, maybe they'll think it's okay to have like messy like code everywhere. And then we'll clean up that space there and one return. So yeah, the main thing there, clean it up. I like two spaces in between my functions. Again, I think that visually separates them. Location manager, nothing going on there. Cool. Extensions, nothing going on there. Everything's good. View extension, I like a little return there. CK record, again, pretty straightforward. CK asset, like the return there. And then what I try to do is I try to just eliminate unnecessary spaces. But again, I don't want things to be super duper cramped. So it's almost like a super subjective on how I do this. So like, for example, this return nil, that's got to be a one-liner. And then because it's a one-liner, I think it's fine to kind of push that up. All these like variable definitions, right, where we're just setting things equal to stuff, and then we line that up. I think that's fine to cram together like that. So clean that up a little bit. Okay, that does it for the extensions. Constants, pretty straightforward. Nothing going on there. Alert items, we've been doing a good job of like lining these equal signs up along the way, so nothing going on there. Okay, so utilities, done. Told you I was gonna go through quick, because I know this may not be the most interesting, but like I said, I do think it's super valuable. DDG location, again, two spaces in between the functions. And the reason I didn't do two spaces when I was like typing this out, because again, my screen was super blown up and I needed all like the screen real estate I could get to show stuff. But now that it's more of a normal size, it's still a little bigger than I normally code in, I am spacing it out how I normally do it. DDG profile, same thing between the function, but everything else pretty straightforward and clean there. And hopefully you're seeing just like how neat and clean this is, right? And again, hopefully your code bases can start to look the same. Custom modifier, again, put a return after like the struct name. Everything there is good. Custom views, map balloon. Okay, so this is another good example, right? Hit return there. This looks, when I have my font not blown up, this is kind of weird looking. So it's because I moved this control parameter to another line, but that's again because my text was super huge. But now that my text is a normal size, you know, that's kind of what I like this to look like. And I don't know, I always like to have, right, I declare my path, do all this stuff onto the path, and I like to have a space before I have the return, because I think that, again, that visually separates it out. DDG annotation. Now here's the thing where I contradict myself sometimes, and I'll admit that, is, so this DDG annotation, anytime I see all these modifiers, I instantly want to refactor it, right? All these modifiers, I instantly want to refactor it. However, sometimes I think because this DDG annotation is relatively simple, right? It's a map balloon, an image, and a number, and a badge. So I'm not going to refactor this one. I think, you know, refactoring it and having a bunch of views down here that are all pertinent to this. I mean, yeah, it would be nice to have this say map balloon, location image, badge. It would be nice just to have that, but again, it's not super difficult. If this does grow and we add more stuff to it, maybe I'll reconsider. Again, just my subjective opinion on refactoring. So the photo picker, going through here, I'm going to start putting some of this stuff on one line, because again, it's pretty straightforward, easy to read. And that's something you'll see that I like that some people may hate, putting like this initializer on one line. And my reasoning for doing this is depending on how it reads, and you'll see a couple instances coming up, sometimes it does read tricky. But for example, I think this line, it's easy to read, easy to understand what's going on. Again, subjective, but that makes this a lot neater to look at. Okay, buttons here. X dismiss button, fine. DDG button, fine. Nothing going on there. Avatar view, fine. Logo view, and again, these are very simple views, so I don't expect things to be out of whack there. So everything's good there. So views are done. Now onto screens. App tab view. And again, I usually clean up along the way, so there's not much for me to do here, but if your code base is messy, maybe your spacing is inconsistent, you got comments everywhere that aren't supposed to be there, start cleaning that stuff up. So my app tab view, again, 2 spaces vertically on the functions. And then also I need to start looking at, hey, can stuff be private? You know, I got to start paying attention to that on my view models, because anything that's only being used in this file should be marked private, helps the compiler out. And I'll put this has seen onboard view as a one-liner, because again, I feel like that's relatively easy to read, right? Here's my variable has seen onboard view. It returns user default standard, you know, 4 key, pretty straightforward there. And I'll go down and move this guardlet up on that function. Okay, app tab view. So these tab items, I like to make one line. I just think that's pretty straightforward. Hey, here's my tab item. It's a label with a map, right? That's pretty straightforward. And again, you'll just see how this little stuff adds up over time. Same thing with my navigation view, put the profile view there. And then it does have a tab item. We'll tab it over. And then the label is one line. So again, you can start to see how this is like, you know, becoming neater and neater as we do it. Like I said, this little stuff definitely adds up. Location list view. This is the location list view model. Fine. Okay, so this extra print statement, that's another thing. These excess print statements, get rid of. You don't need them unless you're doing it for developer debugging purposes. And what I mean by that is like you want that to print out into the future, not for, hey, I was trying to get this to work, so I was printing stuff just while I was building it. Get rid of those print statements. But sometimes, like I said, you do have print statements in there that you want in there forever to let the developer know, like, hey, this is what's going on. So delete the unneeded print statements. Location list view. Okay, again, I'm going to put this onto one line now that my code is a normal size. Just to clean that up a little bit. Yeah, not much more we can do there. Our location cell. So again, same thing that I talked about with the annotation is that I see this kind of stuff, I want to refactor it. I see this, I want to refactor it, right? And I wouldn't argue with you if you did do that. However, I'm going to keep it, and you see I'm contradicting myself. Like I said, I'll admit that because I do have my additional profiles view down here. However, the reason I did that is because it was part of logic. Like it wasn't an if-else statement, and I felt having stuff in here was confusing. But again, if you wanted to have, location image, location title, and then the nobody's checked in empty state, all as like more views, just like this additional profile view down here, I wouldn't argue with that. But as long as it stays, this is what, 47 to 16, like 30 lines of code, I'm fine keeping it there. But again, I wouldn't argue with you if you wanted to refactor it. Location detail view. Here's our view model. Again, I do these little basic simple initializers. I definitely like to do one line. Let's line up these equal signs. And you'll notice I'm not always lining up my equal signs. It's usually when there's like a long list of stuff being like initialized or something is when I want to do it. If it's only like 2 things, like right here, like I'm not going to worry about lining those up. So I know Like generally in your code, you want to be like consistent with what you do. And maybe I'm just bad at that. I do like a space in between my success case and failure case. Again, visually separate those. But what I was saying is, I know I'm probably not the best at being 100% consistent in my styling, but again, it's kind of subjective on like, sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. Anyway, 2 spaces in between the functions vertically, again, visually distinct, do that. Okay, now this function, I've thought about this function, right? I don't love it. The reason I don't love it is, I don't know, it's long, 71 to 113, so that's 40-ish lines of code. That's about it's right about the amount where I don't like it. But again, we got, we're fetching the record, then we're saving the record, and we got the switch statement here with the, checked in status. I don't love this function. However, I also don't see like obvious, super easy, clear-cut beneficial refactoring to like separate that out. So I'm going to live with it now, but I don't love it. And that's another lesson, is that you're going to have areas of your code base that you hate. Like there's plenty of projects I've built where I'm like, oh my God, I hate this screen, but either the refactor would take too much time and you got to build other stuff, or for whatever reason, right, that you haven't gotten a chance to go back and like fix it. So that is a lesson, is there are going to be some areas of your code that you're just going to hate. Again, vertical spacing there. And again, back to contradicting myself, I'll admit, is here I don't have a space between my success and failure case because it's only one line. So that's an example where I do think if it's just one line simple stuff, I think it looks better clumped up together. However, if it's complex, right, with our success case here or our success case here, like then I like to have the space in between my failure case. Again, what I go for, even though it's a little inconsistent, is what is most easy to read on the eye, right? You've seen code that's like super clumped up and it's very hard to read and figure out. So I go for letting my code breathe enough to be easiest to read and easier to understand on the eye. That's what I go for. This location detail view, we're going to come back to that. I'm going to have a whole video dedicated to refactoring this because this is a mess in my opinion. Even though it's only like 114 lines of code, may not seem like that bad. I think this is a shit show to be honest. So rather than mess with it right now, I'm going to dedicate a whole video into refactoring that. So we'll move on to the profile modal view. Now, this is an example of where I said like it's kind of simple and it's all like one little view, not bad. However, I really want to refactor this one, mainly because I just think it's hard to read and figure out what's going on, even if you had the preview up next to you. So as part of that location detail view refactor, we'll refactor this profile modal view as well. But really, it's just going to be like yanking out this image, yanking out this text and stuff like that, and just calling it like, first name text, company name text, bio text, image. I just think it'll read much easier because this is just, again, it's all about the visual aesthetics for me. Personal opinion. Okay, profile view, almost done. I know this may not be the most interesting video. Maybe to some of you it's really interesting. Maybe to some of you, you just probably skipped it already. But okay, did set. So this is an example where this might be confusing. So if you have your variable existing profile record, and then there's a did set, and that happens, I think this is borderline. So in my opinion, if something is borderline, you probably shouldn't do it just because, some people may find it confusing. So I'm going to keep that there, but we're going to add an extra space there. Remove this space here, add 2 vertical spaces to the function. And actually, I think isValidProfile can be private. I think we're only using that here. So that can be a private func. And a good way to do that is to mark it private and do a command B. And if you get all kinds of errors saying, hey, I can't access this function, you mess something up, but we're good. So get checked in status, cool. Again, we'll add a space here because there is some logic in the success and failure case. 2 vertical spaces, success, and again, success failure. There are 2 one-liners, that's fine. There you go, 2 vertical spaces, create profile. Everything looks good. Again, we'll add a little vertical space there to visually separate that. 2 vertical spaces in between the function. Minimize that space right there. Put those 2 together because they are like related, right? Here I set the profile reference, and then here I use the profile reference. So I'll kind of put those 2 together. And again, we're kind of good here. 2 vertical spaces. We've been doing a pretty good job along the way of not having a mess. But again, I'm sure you've been in code bases that are a mess, and I'm sure you've built code that is a mess along the way. Our profile view. I think we can definitely do some refactoring here. Again, we'll come back to that in our dedicated refactor video, but especially something like this label, that the checkout button, that definitely needs to be refactored. So yeah, this can use some help. Again, we're pushing 100 lines of code here. But little stuff like this, like again, when I have my sheet and it's a simple image, right, just a photo picker with the view model and the avatar, I'll make that one line. However, if the view I'm showing in this sheet is like pretty complex, then I probably wouldn't do that. So I know I've said this before, but if it's super simple, that's when I do the one line. If it gets a little complex, the 2 lines is how I feel about that. Okay, we'll probably revisit this screen in the dedicated refactor videos, but let's keep it moving. Okay, the last view, we're almost done. Location map view model. Again, we'll add an extra line, vertical spacing there in the function. Just a one-liner, so there. We'll have to add some alerts here in an optimization video. We'll do like a whole alert review where we make sure we're hitting all of our spots. That's something you should do as well. Just like now we're doing like a cleanliness review. Again, in that situation, you should do a, hey, am I showing an alert everywhere? Because normally when you're developing, you'll just write some half-assed error handling thing like, hey, show an alert here, or you'll put in like a placeholder alert. So you want to go back through and make sure all your alerts are good. As you notice, I just put that onto one line. Location map view, space here. I don't know why that. And okay, down here in our on appear, I'll make this a one-liner. And because it's a one-liner, now I can bring this one up as well. Let me go back and like talk about that too. So anytime I have stuff on a two-liner with an ending curly brace like this, like I don't like to have it crunched up like that, right? And if there's an ending curly brace, I like a space. So by making this a one-liner, at least to me, that allows me to crunch these up a little bit and still, in my opinion, read well, right? If location manager.locations is empty, view model get locations for location manager. I think that's pretty straightforward. And then now that I'm looking at it, I think this is the one, again, I'm going to contradict myself. I'm going to do it. So I could see people thinking this is confusing, but I think it reads pretty well, right? So the toolbar being on one line, you have .toolbar, you have a button, dismiss, that button has an action, and the action is view model is showing details false. The reason I think people might find it confusing is there's like a lot of curly braces on one line, as you see there. I'm curious what you think, right? Because remember I just said, hey, if it's borderline, you should default to the safe version. I think this is like creeping up to that borderline status. So I'd love to hear what you think. Do you find this line confusing? Or do you think it reads straightforward? And be honest, don't think that you're going to be a noob if you think it's confusing. Like don't think that at all. Don't be like, oh yeah, it's super straightforward. I'm going to show that I'm smart. Give me your honest opinion because I'm curious about that. Okay, and the last view here is the onboard view, logo view. Again, anytime there's like one little simple modifier, again, one-liner, just think it's easier to read. Again, our onboard view is only like 30 lines of code. So I think this screen is fine. We've already refactored out this onboard info view, which was the bulk of the work here. So I think we're good here. So again, that was just a quick run through of cleanliness. Again, we're looking for print statements we want to get rid of. We're looking for comments that are not supposed to be there, right? When you're experimenting and testing code, you're commenting stuff out, get rid of that. Make sure your spacing is good and consistent. Make sure you don't have a huge wall of text of code that's all clumped together. Let it breathe a little bit. Make stuff easier to read. So again, it's all just making your code look neat. And I know that sounds superficial. It doesn't matter at all for how your program runs. I agree. But it matters for people coming into your code base, maybe even you 6 months from now, right? Coming into a clean, nice workspace is good. And if you ever have teammates coming into your workspace, you want it super clean as well. So that is the whole point of this. Again, just to keep that workspace tidy. Okay, so now that we've done that cleanup, let's get on to the second 90% stuff where we're going to refactor, dynamic type, haptic feedback, make sure it looks good on all screen sizes, all that good stuff. Let's keep it moving.